another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a Sunday night. It's 18 minutes past the hour of 11 p.m. that we will come to you live from Kampala, Uganda. And it's a pleasure to be back. I know a lot of you have been asking about a Sunday morning broadcast and things like that. But I'm yet to figure that out. But if I do, you'll be the first to know. But for now, we'll keep Sundays to late evening. But perhaps maybe something in the middle of the day. I'm trying to figure out how to get that done as well. Pedri, I'm watching Barcelona and just wanted to say hi to you too, and bye bye. Yeah, I'm also following the events. I just saw Lamine Yamal there scoring a very very beautiful goal. So it's good. I'm also trying to follow the updates from that game between Barcelona and Como. But thank you so much, Pedri. Perhaps you'll give us, the snapshot of what will have transpired between Como and Barcelona at the end of that game. But for now, it's all good. It's all good. I'm equally following the events slowly by slowly as they do coming from that end of the stream. Quickly, allow me update. Of course, our focus today will be on the FA Community Shield. We did witness Crystal Palace beat up against Liverpool to win it. I mean, nothing against Liverpool, but I was rooting for Crystal Palace. Like I've always told you guys, I do love the underdog. I do love the underdog. And what this meant for Crystal Palace in a way, because the kind of confidence that it gives them going into the season, knowing that they won the FA Cup last season and now they get to win the Community Shield, as they wait for that judgment from the Court of Arbitration for Sport in regards to their fate, in regards to where they get to play next season. Is it going to be the UEFA Europa League or the UEFA Conference League? And things like that. So it is important. It is really, really important that we get to understand what the decisions are going to be. But while they wait for that decision, while there's a bit of uncertainty and looming around some of their players like Ebeleche Eze and things like that, they will take solace in knowing that they've gotten a win and they've gotten a trophy. It's not the biggest of trophies that should take bragging rights. Hello, guys. That's Eric Gema. Hi, Eric Gema. Good to have you on the broadcast. For those of you that are just joining us on the broadcast, good evening to you as well. How are you guys doing? My name is Robert Kesakos, and I do come to you live from Kampala, Uganda. It's about 21 minutes past the hour of 11 p.m. So do let me know where you're joining us down in the comment section, and I'll be reading every single one of your comments. Do me the absolute honor and favor and like the broadcast, but more importantly, subscribe to the channel and help me to 2,000 subscribers. Please. Currently, we are at about 1,468. So every subscription does count. So do me that absolute honor and favor and like the broadcast, but also subscribe to the channel. Let me know where you're joining us from, and I'll be reading each and every one of your comments for as long as it's stand worthy of being read out. But also do let me know what sport you pay allegiance to, what particular club. And this particular night, we're discussing that game between Liverpool and Crystal Palace. Very, very beautiful game that we did get to witness. So many positives to take away for both sides. But I think the bragging rights will go to Crystal Palace because at the end of the day, they walked away as winners after a 2-2 draw, after winning the fixture. A 3-2 on penalties that proceeded a 2-2 draw in normal time. In regards to normal time, the first half, Liverpool took the half-time lead. Aktadul Gaming says, hello, sir. Hi, Aktadul. Where are you joining us from? Good to have you on the broadcast. So, Hugo Ekitike opening his Liverpool account, and what a stage to open your official Liverpool account. What a way to do it anyway. The way he does curl that ball beyond the reach of Dean Henderson in the Crystal Palace goal was simply brilliant. And the way he took the ball in his stride, very, very beautiful to watch, really, to give Liverpool that lead. And, it was really, really impressive. For the kind of pressure that comes with a player, for a player like Hugo Ekitike, how are you from? I'm from Kampala, Uganda. Thanks for asking. Small country in the eastern part of Africa. That's where you're from. Tester of life says, "How is it, man? It's all good. I hope you're doing well. Just a little bit of nausea here and there, but we'll be okay. Everything else is good. How has been your Sunday so far?" So it was a beautiful game of football to watch. And like I was saying, for the kind of pressure that comes with the price tag of 69 million pounds, forget the 10 million pounds in adults, coming into a new league like the Premier League, coming to a team like the size of Liverpool, the home of the champions, the reigning champions of the Premier League. I mean, you yet to make your mark on the French national team, and yet you cost them that much, and things like that. With all the rumor that they want to sign Alexander Isak and things like that. Why are you feeling? Why are you feeling nausea? I don't know. It just came out. It's especially in the late afternoon. I don't know what really caused it, but I think it will subside with the night as it goes on. Is it hot there? Yeah. It's been really, really hot. We're in our dry season, so some of these things are really expected. So you have so many places that are, a bit dry and dusty, given the nature of overall infrastructure and things like that. So yeah. So I mean, when you're Hubwe Tike, I think every player dreams of a good start to their career at a new club, and what a way for Hubwe Tike to break that ice with that brilliant goal against Crystal Palace. Well, that lead lasted for as long as it could because Crystal Palace quickly answered on the other side. That goal came in as early as the 4th minute with Florian Wirtz, again the most expensive signing in Liverpool's history. Providing the assist, another player getting off the mark in brilliant style. So was really, really impressive. But 13 minutes later, Liverpool's lead was cancelled out through a Joan Felipe Mateta sending Alson Ramsey-Becker in the opposite direction as he slotted that down the bottom corner. Brilliant penalty taken, the resultant of which was a foul of Virgil van Dijk against Ismail Sarr. So that's where we had the result. Of course, and then just about 4 minutes later, Liverpool restored parity in the 21st minute, although some clock works read 20 minutes and 20 seconds, which marked the sort of 2020 for Diego Jota, so much to imply, but in essence, that was Jeremy Frimpong. It appeared as though he was cross, but then on second look, the more you look at it, the more intentional it looks that he really curls that ball, sort of not even actually carrying it. It's like more like hanging it over, and then it dips into the other back end of the net in brilliant style. So it restored Liverpool's lead. Well, I hope you feel better soon, man. Try putting a wet towel on your forehead for some minutes. Perhaps I'll try that when I go to bed or before I go to bed. I'll get to try that. But thanks for the recommendation. So Dominic Szoboszlai provided that assist, and Jeremy Frimpong equally got off the mark. Brilliant style. Liverpool got their lead 2-1. We had a penalty shout out in the same game for a second penalty shout out in the second half. That was for a handball, I think, by Alexis McAllister in the area, but even after VAR, it was not given. So, which many of us, or some of us, who were rooting for Crystal Palace, we thought Crystal Palace were hard done by in the moment. But then I remember responding to one of the tweets on the similar topic, and are saying that Crystal Palace were just playing for their sins because they equally walked away with it against Manchester City in the finals of the FA Cup at the same venue when Dean Henderson handled that ball outside the area while Erling Haaland attempted to make a run for the ball. So anyway, two wrongs do not make a right. But again, it's another game that ends beautifully, but with a decision that is subject for discussion because maybe the officials did not do enough to alleviate any doubts over the decisions that they had made on the given day. So those things are bound to be expected, and I think we'll continue to see them more and more of them. So how was your Sunday? Generally, it's been very okay. It's been a wonderful day. not much issues. I got a little bit of rest. That's why I missed out on some games. I managed to catch the game between Angola and Zambia. Angola, coming from a goal down to win that one 2-1. Then the earlier game, I missed that one as Kenya beat up against Morocco. I missed that one. Kenya beat up against Morocco by goal to nil, meaning Kenya are equally still unbeaten. Yes. Kenya finishing that game by by a man less, and it's the second time they've completed the game with a man less, and yet they remain unbeaten in their pool. With that's I think, is it Pool B? Or no, actually Pool A, where they do lead with a tally of 7 points. Angola following there with 4 points, while DR Congo and Morocco, who play each other in their final game of the group, will be only left with 3 points. That means Kenya have almost guaranteed their place in the knockout stages, waiting for confirmation on who else will join them. Tanzania, the other impressive side, are still unbeaten. So that's the update from the African Nations Championship. So that's how partly I spent my Sunday before switching gears to catch up on a couple of minutes. Right now, I'm following the game between Barcelona and Como, and Barcelona are leading that game by 5 goals to nil. And the unfortunate bit is that Francesco Sola Fabregas is getting a beating. His team is getting a beating from his, one of his former clubs in FC Barcelona. But it's all good. It's all good. So, like I still say, on the side of Crystal Palace, the Liverpool got away with that one, but then in the 77 minutes, Adam Wharton turned a provider there as Ismail Sarr restored parity, and the game finished 2-2 in normal time, and went into penalties, which I thought were really, really horrible. Nothing to take away from the goalkeeper, Dean Henderson, for his saves. He saved 2 penalties. Liverpool missed the other. Mo Salah opened the penalty shootout, and he missed his own penalty in quite similar fashion to the way he missed that penalty against what? There's a preseason game in which they played, and he missed a penalty. Was it against Bilbao? I stand to be corrected, but he sort of similar fashion. So he missed the penalty. And then Joan Felipe Mateta, who had scored the penalty in normal time, stepped up and scored. Then the other subsequent penalties, didn't have Henderson served 2 penalties. Alson Ramsey-Becker served 1 penalty. The other hit the crossbar. That's for Crystal Palace. Yes. And so the game finished 3-2 on penalties. I think it was Cody Gakpo and Dominic Szoboszlai that were able to score for Liverpool when it came to the penalties. Ebelechi Eze missed his penalty. I thought it was a very, very poor penalty. He took a lot of time. He tried to do, the jump stop kind of movement where, you wait the keeper to make movement and you sort of take the ball. He didn't have pace and power to it, so it was an easy save for Alson Ramsey-Becker. So he missed his penalty. So, but otherwise, on paper, Crystal Palace really, really looked good. They competed well in normal time. There were, like I said, there were a lot of positives for Oliver Glasner, even though his squad remains short. For as long as, if they can retain that core of the team, if they do not lose Ebelechi Eze, if they do not lose the captain who was taken off injured as the game wore on, that's Mark Kehi, then they go into next season with a sort of a fair squad. It wouldn't be the best of squads, given that they have to compete in the UEFA Europa League or UEFA Conference League, depending on what decision the Court of Arbitration gives us there. Liverpool played well today, but Crystal Palace did want Liverpool to have the Community Shield. Penalties are always 50-50. I think Crystal Palace deserved the win today. I couldn't agree more. Anas Roth was giving his review of the game, and he was saying today they competed better against Crystal Palace than they did last season, because last season they couldn't score 2 goals, and yet today they were able to do that. Something like that. And yeah, Liverpool played well. You thought Jeremy Frimpong, I like the way he goes forward. I like his effectiveness sort of in the final third. Does he need is there room for improvement? Most obviously, but yeah, there's so many positives to take away for Liverpool as well. But there are still concerns in that Liverpool defense. You can actually feel it that they are short. The way they started was Cody Gakpo, Mo Salah, Ektike leading the line, Florian Wirtz coming off the back of Ektike in that number 10 wall, and then a double pivot of Timikas, I think, and Dominic Soboslai. Those were the starters on the Liverpool side. Let me confirm that. No, it was actually Curtis Jones. Yes, Curtis Jones, not Timikas. It was Curtis Jones. Then Milos Kakes, Frimpong, Virgil van Dijk, Konate, and Alson Ramsey-Baker. Now, in this particular case, I think the only omission you would have is Curtis Jones to accommodate either Wataru Endo, who equally came off the bench, or Ryan Gravenberch to start in that midfield. Then Alexis McAllister came off the bench. He did replace. He did replace Hugo Ekitike. So then on the side of Crystal Palace, it was a back three, midfield four, then the sort of two de facto number 10s who also play as wingers, and Joan Felipe Mateta. So it was Dean Henderson, Chris Richards, Maxence, Mark Gay, Daniel Munoz, Daichi Kamada, Adam Wharton, Tyreek Mitchell, Ismail Sarr, Eberechi Eze, and Joan Felipe Mateta. So that was the side of Crystal Palace that did start. And I thought if they were to go ahead and play in the Premier League week in, week out, like they did compete against Liverpool, then you do fast them that they may not be under any sort of threat or when it comes to relegation. However, where I think their challenge could come is taking care of the responsibilities that come with, taking care of the responsibilities that do come with playing on a Thursday and then on the weekend, because that in itself is never easy, especially when you have a short squad. They will need any update on Eze. Let's speak about Eze in just a bit. You sort of think that responsibility is not going to be easy for them. It's not going to be easy one bit, really. So, I'm not just saying that because I'm an Arsenal fan. Yeah, I do understand. I do understand. That's why I do agree. When it comes to penalties, by the way, historically, for example, we knew Germans to be very, very good at penalties, but there's points when they've not been good at that. So when it comes to penalties, it's always a 50-50. You know, sometimes the players could get nervous and they miss penalties. For example, I do not think any of us would have thought that Mo Salah could miss such a penalty. Not at such a stage, so to speak. Not that he can never miss one, but at that kind of stage. So you sort of felt that, or you thought that, and then you look at the way Dean Henderson stepped up to save those other two penalties in quite spectacular fashion. Okay, then Eberechi Eze, that was for me a lazy penalty. That's why I say I do agree with you that when it comes to penalties, it's always 50-50s. You never know which side it's going to, break for. Regarding Eberechi Eze, I'm afraid for me, in terms of concrete updates, there's not much of an update, really. There's not been much progress on that deal. However, in the course of today, there were reports from, I do not remember what source, because I did not think it was credible enough for me to report it as factual, because I cross-checked with multiple sources and I couldn't find any, reports alluding to similar situations. But there was information that that Arsenal had agreed to a £55 million fee with Crystal Palace for Eberechi Eze, and that £30 million will be expected upfront and the other to come in installments. And then, of course, that came on the backdrop of Oliver Glasner saying something like that he wouldn't guarantee that, they will retain all their key players. Because he was being asked about players like Eberechi Eze, who's been constantly linked to the move away. players like McKay, players like Joan Filippo Mateta, and things like that. And even the club chairman, that's Steve Parrish, we were speaking about on if ability is will leave Crystal Palace this summer. He said players come and go. It's a life cycle. Hopefully they are still here. That's what I would like, but we will see. So again, that doesn't that was according to, I think, is it Haters TV, who were quoted for that and that video clip in which he said those words. So again, that doesn't give you much confidence. If you are a Crystal Palace fan, you have hope that you'd have hoped that maybe your CEO is saying no, we're not losing our big players. It's a big summer for us. Yes, we understand why they would want to move to bigger clubs, but we have qualified for Europe, and that's a big step for us. We need all our best players with us, and those kinds of assurances, really. But also being a Crystal Palace that we know that you need the resources, really. Part of why they've not done much business so far in this transfer window is partly because of the lack of, or the limited resources at their disposal. And if you are, and it's not the ideal situation, but if you had to lose a player like Ebeleche Eze, who is into the last 2 years of his contract, a player like McGahey, and you get good money out of them, and you can use that to reinvest in another set of 3 to 4 players if you can scout well. So, for example, if let's say you lose Ebeleche Eze for north of £50 million, you can go and get 2 good players at the cost of about £25 million. If you lose McGahey, let's say for about 35 to 40 million pounds, but let's take the upper end of 40 million pounds if you can find a club that can actually pay that, because he is that good. Only that he has entered the last year of his contract, so it becomes a bit difficult. Salam Kanal Bang, the rival. Is it the rival? I'm struggling to read that. The rival. I didn't understand your comment. Andrea Bata is a blessing to the club. I think so too. But so if you're a team like Crystal Palace, you get rid of McKay instead of losing him next summer for free, even if you're getting just 35 million pounds. I know there are not so many good defenders that you're going to get out there, but again, if your scouting is good enough, you can actually go and make replacements. They've already sold Rob Holding to Colorado Rapids, which is owned by KSE Sports. That's Koronki Sports and Entertainment over there in the Major League Soccer. So you try and squeeze your little bit of resources and bring in reinforcements. Like he said, players come and go. Even at big clubs, those things do happen. Those things do happen. For example, you could look at a club like Chelsea. They are letting go of good players, and not because they would want to lose all of them, but also because of where they find themselves when it comes to the financial side of the of the UEFA financial fair play rules. But then you go again to clubs like AC Milan. They've just lost Malik Thiaw to Newcastle. They wouldn't have loved to let him go. So those things do happen. You look at Paris Saint-Germain. They could lose Gianluigi Donnarumma. They did not. Coming into this transfer window, they had hoped that it doesn't come to that, but it could happen. So I sort of do understand what Steve Parrish is trying to tell us when it comes to that. Then about you say, do you think Edu would do if given up on Gyökeres after the first time Sporting made the negotiations a bit difficult? I do not think he would have. But here's the context. Edu and his recruitment team were never in preference over Victor Gyökeres. The preference was Benjamin Sesko. And they looked at Victor Gyökeres as a tier 2 striker, kind of. In fact, the reason that's why I say they looked at him as a tier 2 striker, they looked at him as a support striker for Kai Havertz, but not a striker that comes in and unseats Kai Havertz. Whereas Andre Bata looked at Victor Gyökeres as the main man, So Edu Gaspar and Jason Aito and all those the minors within Arsenal's recruitment ranks, their focus was on Benjamin Sesko. That was their primary target. for this transfer window. And again, as has been widely reported, that Edu wanted to identify a target for a particular position and primarily focus on that target until he got the deal done. If a deal proved difficult to do or undoable, that's when he moved on to his plan B and maybe plan C. You remember in 2023 January when he really pushed to try and bring in Mukalo Modric, because that's the player Mikel Arteta wanted, that's the player he wanted, but things did not go according to plan. He ended up at Chelsea, and then the plan B was Leandro Trossard. So they got Leandro Trossard from Brighton and over Albion. So that's how he did operate. However, when it comes to Andre Bata, apparently he loves to attack on multiple fronts to sort of leverage sides sometimes, because as you negotiate for this, you're telling this partner that, look, I already have a deal in place here, but I would prefer to go with you if you're willing to make business with me. And he goes back to the other side and almost tells them the reverse of what he's just told you, and sort of play the market like that. So again, you have this word that Eberechi is out there in the market. But then Arsenal have not ruled out entirely ending up with a very different player if that deal proves undoable, things like that. But what has been reported with a certain level of surety is that at least before the end of the transfer window, they will have brought in a left winger or an attacking midfielder. Then the Arsenal hierarchy also agree that they need to do better when it comes to selling players. Now, of course, you have to benchmark on teams like Liverpool or teams like Chelsea, who have been really good at selling, players. You look at Tottenham in a couple of years gone by; they've been good at selling, players or some of the big players, and Arsenal have struggled to move on players. In the recent past, in the manner in which they've moved on players was having contracts cancelled, and things like that, or moving them on for very little fees. Of course, there have been a few outliers, the likes of Emil Smith-Rowe, Eddie Nketiah, who were moved on last summer. Then you look back at Florian Balgan, who went to Monaco, and things like that. So there have been a few outliers, but overall, Arsenal look at themselves and think that perhaps different negotiators maybe would have gotten slightly better money for that. There are players like Chris Nelson who they want to move on, but they are struggling. They are really struggling to move them on at the right fees. You have players like Albert Sambilokonga is a player they want to move on. You have a player like Fabio Vieira, who is a target for Stuttgart, but they are struggling to move him on. Why are Arsenal struggling at that? And yet, other clubs are able to move on their players quite, I wouldn't say easily, but at the right fees, So they need to improve on their selling ability to use player sales as another stream of, revenue coming into the club. So when you look at the net transfer spend between, for example, Liverpool, Chelsea, and Arsenal, you'll find that Arsenal has a higher net transfer spend because Chelsea and Liverpool have sold players and for good money. Hi, LFC. Yes, Robert, I'm back. Good to have you back. I was just watching Avengers Infinity War. Wow, okay, that's good. Hi to you too. So yeah, I think on assessment, Andrea Bat has done a very good job. When it came to player recruitment, he's at least brought in majority of the players Arsenal would have loved to bring in this summer in terms of the replacements for those that they had already lost. And then in addition, the primary priority for this transfer window, which was the striker, he's managed to get that done before the official kickoff of the season. So what is left that is still much needed in that squad is, for me, in my opinion, as the squad currently is two players. And any other addition to those two players will depend on any departures whatsoever. So those would be an attacking midfielder and a left winger to support the players that are currently available. Now, yes, I look at a player like Ethan Nwaneri, is an attacking midfielder, can play a supportive role to Martin Odegaard, but this, like I keep saying, the season is very long. You can never determine what happens. Just the other day, I was reporting to you that Manchester City's Rugby had suffered an injury setback that will see him out for at least 1 month, and he's expected to return mid-September. So you can't have those issues. They can happen to you. As unfortunate as injuries come, they are part of the game, and we cannot have another season where Arsenal use injuries as the excuse. So you need that squad depth, and not just squad depth, but a squad depth of quality. So that's where they need to have their focus. How is it going, Nova Bro? It's all good. I need to go now. Have a nice day. Thank you so much, Nova Bro. Nova Bro usually spares a minute to come and say hi to us, and then immediately signs out. But it's all good. So that's how I do feel about Andre Bata. He's successfully completed, I think, the 2/3 of the job, and while it's not yet all done, for example, he's been successful at contract renewals for Gabriel Magalhaes, Maz Luis Kelly, and Ethan Nwaneri. There's Bukayo Saka and William Saliba still left at to hold contract talks with. So he's yet to get over the line for those. Today I was reading some reports that are yet to be confirmed that Arsenal had reached an agreement with William Saliba on a new contract, but I've not yet seen that from more concrete resources for me to speak about it with the kind of confidence that I would have spoken about it with if it had come from a more trusted source. But those reports are also there, but we know it's something that he needs to get done. So in terms of contract renewals, he's done well on that side. Player recruitment, he's done well on that side so far. But where he needs to do now more, where he needs to sort of prove himself a little further to the Arsenal fan base, is to do with moving on players. And like I said, players like Alexander Zichenko, players like Albert Sambilokonga, Fabio Vieira, Reece Nelson, those are some of the players that the club is looking at to move on. Earlier, I think today, there were some reports suggesting that AC Milan could target Jakub Kiwior as a replacement for Malik Thiaw, who they lost to Newcastle, and things like that. So let's wait and see. There has been players that we could go. For example, Mukala Modric, the asking fee Shakhtar was asking, we offered them a few million less. Then Chelsea got him. Edu failed to give a good signing. Again, he was more fit a player for Arsenal than Chelsea, in my opinion. Again, as subjective as that is in its own nature, I would say this, that the way things have happened between Chelsea and Mukala Modric, Arsenal fans would think maybe they dodged a bullet. But also, there are many with the school of thought that he was a better fit for Arsenal than he was for Chelsea. Let's not forget that the player's ideal destination was Arsenal. Unfortunately, he did not get that move the way he would have loved it. So what ended up happening was Chelsea offering a few more millions and more guaranteed fees. But also, when we are blaming sporting directors for failing to deliver certain players, let's not forget that they do not work independently. And the reason that's why I say this is entirely because of finances. For example, in the aftermath of signing Victor Gyökeres, I did learn that apparently Andre Bata had been told that the cap for a transfer deal for Victor Gyökeres was no more than £65 million. Everything done and dusted. So sometimes sporting directors, they need that extra backing from within the ranks of the club CEOs or managing directors or things like that, or even owners at certain level. We know that on multiple occasions towards the summer or during the summer, Mikel Arteta, sometimes with the sporting director, they go meet the Koronkis and discuss what they expect to do this summer, what their plans are, and what they are looking to get. And some of the financial backing or the green light for some of these deals comes from that high up the food chain in terms of the club. So while it may be you may be justified to say that perhaps Edu Gaspada would fail to deliver on the player, let's not forget that sometimes maybe if he had the financial leeway, he could have delivered on the player because the player wanted to come to us. What ended up happening was that Chelsea offered €5 million more because the total deal for them was €100 million, while Arsenal's ceiling was at 95. Then also Chelsea offered more money up front in terms of guaranteed fees as compared to what Arsenal were willing to offer. Then when it comes to achievable add-ons, Chelsea were offering more softer or more achievable add-ons than Arsenal were offering. So at the end of the day, Arsenal are trying to get a good deal and get a good player. But then Chelsea thought, let's just blow Arsenal out of the water and win over the player. So they blew Arsenal out of the water in terms of financial terms for the structure of the deal, and they left it to Shakhtar Donetsk to convince the player that Chelsea was equally a good move for him to do. And we all know how that has turned out to be. But there's no doubt that he would have been a better fit for Arsenal. Because in the stage at which Arsenal were at the time, when they were trying to pursue him, is what convinces me to believe in your submission that Arsenal might have been a better fit. At the end of the day, he's ended up in a pool of when you're an apple in a basket of apples, you're not going to stand out. You are equally an apple. So that's how I could relate it at Chelsea. Well, at Arsenal, he would have been perhaps an apple in a basket of oranges, if I'm to use that kind of analogy. That when you look at coming in as a support role, because, by the way, that was Arsenal's first attempt to find a backup player for Bukayo Saka, because that's what he was going to be, a partner, and it just didn't happen. Then you say there was a headline before last season ended that the owner was willing to put a 300 million in pre-season window. What happened to that backing? Again, then we have Felix. Felix is a man. Oh, apologies. Can you say my name? Liam Tosso. Oh, but your handle says Felix, and then you're saying you Liam Tosso. Hi, Liam Tosso, or hi, Felix, whichever the correct name is. Good to have you on the broadcast. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. Back to Tester's comment or a question about the 300 million pounds. Again, for example, when it comes to these transfer budgets, usually, like I explained it, it's oftentimes not that you have 300 million pounds guaranteed. For example, you could have, let's say, 150 million pounds to spend, but then the entire budget, as you know, could be 300 million pounds, but cash at hand is that. So again, when you look at the kind of business Arsenal have done, they're not far off that mark, by the way, because they are around the mark of 194 million pounds plus, around that, when you do the totality of their transfer deals. Now, if they are still in the market for an attacking midfielder and a left winger, then it could easily rise that. For just assume Arsenal, let's say, were able to get Ebelechi Eze and Rafael Leao, or Ebelechi Eze and Rodrigo Goes, it could easily rise that. But also, like I said, it's never cash at hand. It's usually to say that you have room to spend as much. So how you structure your deals is important, because that means you're going to spend 300 million pounds on players, but what you've actually paid out is about 100 and 150, depending on the structures of those deals. And then all those balances are paid over a given period of time. But in terms of actual spend or budget spend, you hit the 300 million pounds. But in terms of net spend, then in terms of money that you've actually paid out, it's way less than that, because you expect to pay the other monies in other installments. So it's not true. It's not true that the 300 million pounds was never a true figure. But also, usually that's also speculative in nature, because we never know what our club budgets really are. Again, it's big speculation. For example, Liverpool this summer, they could tell you they had a budget of 500 million pounds to spend. But when you look at the players that have gone out of the door, giving them the money that they've raised, 70 million euros from Luis Diaz as guaranteed fees. You have about 50 million euros from Darwin Núñez deal to Al Hilal. You have 30 million pounds from Joey Quesha. You have 18 million pounds from Kelleher to Brentford. So sometimes also they tell you your budget is 300 million pounds, but part of that budget is expected to come out of player sales. So they assess the squad and say, okay, we can move on these players if we find the right buyers for this kind of valuation. And those are the players that have been highlighting, the Fabio Vieira's that you have in that squad. And let's say if while they wouldn't, Mikel Arteta wouldn't want to do it, but if a very good offer came for Jakub Kiwior, they could move him on. If let's say very good money came in for a player like Tommy Setford, that's the Arsenal's third choice goalkeeper, they can move him on. So that also becomes a channel to try and raise money that adds on to whatever they have at, as cash in hand to build that £300 million budget. That's what I would say. What was your worst signing? What was our worst signing in past 2 seasons, in your opinion, and who is our best signing at this window? Our best signing this window, I'll say, is Victor Gyökeres. And I'll say this reason being, not based on what his success could be at Arsenal or what the expectations that I do have of him, but because it was Arsenal were responding to a need, a long-term need that has been there for ages. That's the why I think it's the best sign, because we know for long they've needed that kind of player. For us who assess our teams in general, especially prior to the start of the season, when you're making your season predictions, you assess a team squad and try to gauge where they will finish within the table based on the quality they have in the squad. And I remember, particularly at the start of last season, when I was saying that Arsenal were not going to win the Premier League title, all the reasons I gave for which that would stand in their way of not winning the Premier League title, I came to see those. I said they had no backup for Martin Odegaard, and once he got injured, their creativity suffered. They had no backup for Bukayo Saka. Once he got injured, they struggled, in scoring goals and creating more chances. I said they had no striker who could give them the edge. And you see, the thing about having a striker, especially in this modern era of football where false nines are a thing. We've seen it at Manchester City, where Pep Guardiola plays with Joao Cancelo, Phil Foden, Ilkay Gundogan, Bernardo Silva, Kevin De Bruyne as false nines, and yet the team continued to thrive. You look at a team like PSG that dominated the whole of Europe last season. Their striker, they had 2 prime strikers, Gonzalo Ramos and Rando Colomwani. Rando Colomwani, they sent out on loan to Juventus. They remained with Gonzalo Ramos, but he was never a starter, predominantly. It was that fluid system of Desiree Doué, Ousmane Dembele, Kivicha Kvaratskhelia, who only joined in January, Bradley Bacolas, Warren Zaire-Emery, Mayuru, and things, players like that. So you look at that and say, but those guys have been thriving. But when you look at teams that have always won titles, you go to Liverpool. Liverpool last season, predominantly, they did not have that outright number 9. But because Arsenal did not have the player that is capable of scoring 28 goals, like Mo Salah did for Liverpool, I thought they would struggle. You need a striker to help you make the difference between taking a point from a game to making that 3 points. So, for example, in that draw against Crystal Palace, that is 2-2 draw, maybe it's the striker that helps you get that winning goal and you walk away with 3 points instead of 1 point. So a striker, while may not be everything for the team, can be the difference in certain games and to winning points. So given that Arsenal have responded to a need that they've had for a very long time, I think that's the best, sign for them in this transfer window. Because, like I said, all the others have been replacements. Now, those replacements have been very good replacements in certain positions, in certain areas. So, for example, look at Martin Zubimendi. You're replacing Thomas Partey with, I do not want to say a better player, but a better player in a different way. I hope that the reason as why I do not want to slice it on that Zubimendi is a better player than Thomas Partey is because their attributes for which Martin Zubimendi is better than Thomas Partey, and their attributes for which Thomas Partey is better than Martin Zubimendi. But Martin Zubimendi is a better player in a different way. So I think that's a good replacement. When you look at Jorginho and Christian Norgard, in terms of the stage in their careers where they are at currently, you find that as a very good replacement. When you look at so far what we've been able to see of Christian Mosquera, he looks to be a decent replacement for Takahiro Tomiyasu, He's been played at right back. He's been played at the right centre back. He's been played at the left side of the centre backs, and he's looked good. So that's been another replacement. When I look at Noni Madueke as a squad replacement for Raheem Sterling last season, I think that's a good replacement. If we are measuring based on what Raheem Sterling did for us last season, I think Noni Madueke stands to do much better than what Raheem Sterling afforded us last season. When you look at the goalkeeping situation, Neto, who came cup-tied, couldn't play in the Carabao Cup. He didn't play, I think, a game in the FA. He only played a game in the Champions League against Girona. When you look at Kepa Arrizabalaga, I think he's a bit of an improvement on Neto, who has since by the joined Botafogo on a 2-year deal after parting ways with Bournemouth. So I look at that, and I think for me, Victor Gyökeres is the best signing, but all these other replacements in the squad have been equally really, really good. You asked about the worst signing in the last 2 seasons. The worst signing in the last 2 seasons. I do not think I can think of any other name beyond Raheem Sterling, unfortunately. Now, part of it had to do with the way we utilized him as a player. But man, a lot of times Raheem Sterling got named in the starting lineup, and I was wondering how was he getting named ahead of Ethan Nwaneri, because he just wasn't delivering. So I thought that was the Arsenal's worst signing in the last 2 seasons, although it was only a loan. In terms of permanent signings, maybe who? Actually, no name comes to mind, because all the players that have not made it at Arsenal, I've seen reasons as why they've not made it. I've seen reasons as why they've not made it. When you look at players like Nuno Tavares, Albert Sambilokonga, Fabio Vieira, I see reasons as to why they've not made it at Arsenal. Okay, let's move on to other comments. But Kai Havertz's main position is not a striker, so you think we should go to strikers this window? Yes, I did a full video explaining why I thought Arsenal need to get 2 strikers in this transfer window. But that argument was based on certain factors. So, for example, part of it was that if Arsenal are signing Benjamin Sesko, I thought they needed another striker. One, he's a 22-year-old unproven striker coming into a new league on a team that the rest of the world thinks that they must win the Premier League title next season because of how long Mikel Arteta has been building his project. Hello, Max. How are you doing? Good to have you on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure seeing you around. You're all acting like Liverpool lost. No. No, we're not acting like that. But let me respond to that, Max, in a bit. Just indulge me, respond to our tester's comment here, and I'll get to yours in a bit. So, I was explaining in that very video, and guys, you can always go back to the channel and under the video section and check it out. The topic there is why Arsenal should need to sign, I think, more than one striker, something like that. And I was saying, if they get a striker who is an unknown quantity, who is yet to break through, and because predominantly they were looking at Benjamin Sesko, I was saying Arsenal needed a second striker, somebody like Oli Watkins, somebody that is already accustomed to the Premier League, gives you an assurance of a certain number of goals in the season. Because while Kai Havertz and Mikel Merino have chipped in as strikers and have scored some brilliant goals, they are not that. They are not giving you 20 goals that you need in a season. So, and then this new young striker in Benjamin Sesko, because that was on whom the assumption was based on, was that you do not want the entire pressure to be on him to bring you 20 goals a season, when he's actually never scored them in the league, even at RB Leipzig. If he ever did score them, I think it was Salzburg in Austria. So really, that was the basis of the argument. And I said that the only way Arsenal should negate signing a second striker is if, one, they got Victor Gyökeres, and two, they got a very good goal-scoring left winger who is a bit of a dynamic player. And at that time, Arsenal were heavily linked with the move for Rodrigo Goes. And we all know that Rodrigo Goes can play across the entire front three. He can play as a striker, he can play as on the left wing, he can play on the right wing, although he prefers to come off the left wing. So that was the other assumption. If Arsenal went in the market and got a player like Xavi Simons, he can play as a target man, he can play on either wings. So that's the way Arsenal would negate the responsibility of having to buy two strikers. But now that they've signed Victor Gyökeres, and who is a proven goal scorer on the European scene, and domestically he has been to in the UK before. Kai Havertz is good as a backup for him, because if he remains fit, then you can rely on him for majority of the season, and Kai Havertz as the support striker in that case. But then again, it does not mean that Arsenal do not need another player in the left wing. So that was the school of thought about that. To have a backup plan in the striking role. Yes, that was a school of thought. And that's why, by the way, partly I felt pained when we lost Chido Martin Obi, because I looked at Chido Martin Obi, our next Eddie Nketiah. Not that he was going to be as good or as bad, depending on how well you assess Eddie Nketiah during his time at Arsenal, but I thought we had lost Mika Bilyat, who went to Austria before moving to Monaco. We had lost Farim Balogun, we had lost Eddie Nketiah. So we did not have a rising striker that will come up once in a while and be given the responsibility and bang you a couple of goals that win you a match, even if it were, to win you games in the Carabao Cup or an FA Cup game, or about maybe score you 5 goals just within the Premier League alone, because we had lost Chido Martin Obi to Manchester United. And it is a little bit unfortunate for him that things have not yet happened for him at Manchester United. But I think he was oversold on that project as well. So that notwithstanding, that's why I thought that Arsenal really needed to get 2 strikers. But now that they've signed a 27-year-old, you cannot go and sign another 29-year-old who turns 30 in Oli Watkins. Maybe you look for a young striker, probably 19, 20 years of age, who is basically just upcoming, and that's the kind of profile striker Arsenal should be looking at. In the academies, when it comes to strikers, there's not been any pronounced names that have come through. Even when you look at players that have been bought, or during preseason, they've been Josh Nicholas at right back, Mali Salmon, Max Dorman. Those are the players that have been brought, on the preseason tour. So that tells you that in the striking role, there's not that player that Arsenal could look on to. Then, okay, let's move on to Max, who says, you're all acting like Liverpool lost a UEFA Champions League final, especially Manchester United and Arsenal fans. You were lost this... Yes, we lost this match, but it's our fault if we lost it because we bottled it with our own hands. Again, like I said in part of the preamble of this particular episode, I was saying that yes, Liverpool have lost this match, but it's not like it's going to earn Crystal Palace a lot of bragging rights because it's a Community Shield. I do not think, while Liverpool would have wanted to win it, I do not think they are going to lose sleep over it in any case. Again, we are talking about a Liverpool side that did not have their best defensive midfielder in that team. Whereas that in itself shouldn't be an excuse for Liverpool to win. I thought Crystal Palace also competed well. I thought they competed well, because when you're a weak side and you're playing against a big team, the first principle for you to try and earn something out of that game is to stay in the game. And what I did say was that there were positives for Liverpool to pick out of that game, but then there were also concerns that I thought Liverpool should address. I can see Moche Red says, I'm worried about our defense. I do not know Moche Red. Are you a Liverpool fan? Please clarify on that, because when you say Reds, I want to assume you're a Liverpool fan, because Liverpool are referred to as the Reds. So, and that is partly what I did mention as part of this podcast, that part of where my concern is or was based on what I saw, is that Liverpool, and again, we've discussed this almost all summer on this channel for the regulars, a bit about this. I've already said that Liverpool need at least two centre backs. One, because they've lost Joey Quensha to Bayer Leverkusen. Two, you have an Ibrahim Konate who has entered the final year of his contract, who up to until now, we do not know whether by the end of the window he will be a Liverpool player or he will have left, which would send Liverpool in low-key sort of panic mode. But also, even if he were to stay, what if you lose either of him or Virgil van Dijk to a long-term injury? It doesn't have to be for the entire season. It only has to be 2-3 months. Are the backup players that you have within your ranks able to hold that foot for that period, knowing how competitive Liverpool plays in the Premier League, in the UEFA Champions League? Can those backup players take on the responsibility? And based on the few names that I know within the Liverpool ranks, I've not seen a player that convinces me otherwise. I've seen Wataru Endo being tried, in that centre back role multiple times, and while he's delivered in part, asking him to play in that role week in, week out in the Premier League and the UEFA Champions League could be a tall order. So I think Liverpool fans and I will agree that if there is a position that needs urgent address, it should be that centre back role. Okay, you look at Virgil van Dijk with all his experience, you never know when his candle is going to begin burning down. It could be this season, and I'm not saying it is going to begin burning down, but for a team like Liverpool, given how they've strengthened, bearing in mind that Sir Alex Ferguson said that when you're at your best is when you should strengthen. That's what Liverpool have looked to do. After renewing contracts for Mo Salah and Virgil van Dijk, they told themselves we need to, reinforce our team. They went big on Florian Wirtz. They've replaced Alexander Trent-Arnold with Jeremy Frimpong. They've looked at that left back position and got Milos Kakis, arguably for me the best left back in the Premier League last season, because he was part of my best 11 of the season. So that's how I looked at it. We need a defensive midfielder and a centre back more than we need Isak. Exactly. Those are the arguments we've been making on this channel. And I remember I had a very big, sort of a big disagreement in opinion with Pedri. For those of you that do know him, he's a regular on this podcast. He's a Barcelona fan. When I was telling him that Liverpool need a defensive midfielder, and he was telling me they do not need one. And I was telling him the reason as why they need one is for the last two transfer windows, summer transfer windows, and I mean, is that Liverpool have been trying to sign a defensive midfielder because they know they need one. They tried with Moises Caicedo and Romeo Lavia in the same transfer window. They failed at that. They tried with Martin Zubimendi. They failed. And I was telling him, just because Ryan Gravenberch stepped up last season and played in that role and he executed it perfectly well, does not mean they do not need a defensive midfielder. Okay, I asked the same question. What if they lost Ryan Gravenberch to a couple of months injury and he's out? Is Wataru Endo going to cover the best? Well, he has that capability, but it may turn out to be a little too much to ask of him, because at the end of the season, the difference for you within which you may lose the title could be as small as 1 point or 2 points, and that difference could have been maybe made by you having a very good replacement for defensive midfielder. Two, I said maybe you think you can conjure something and ask Dominic Soboslai to play in that role. While he can execute it, I do not think it would be up to perfection. So it would leave Liverpool a bit vulnerable. So you cannot have vulnerabilities in defense, and you sort of have worries in midfield, and you want to compete for a quadruple. You want to win the UEFA Champions League, the Premier League title, the FA Cup, and the Carabao Cup. Because I assume when you're a team like Liverpool, the size of Liverpool, arguably the biggest club in English football, in my opinion, I forget the size of the global brand, as people may put it. You're going to have to compete for all those major trophies. And for you to compete for all those major trophies, you're going to need those to cover bases. In defense, you need a replacement for Joey Quensha, but also you need another player in there. You look at Arsenal. For the last 2 seasons, they've had the best defensive side in terms of goals conceded and things like that. While it has not won them any titles, I think a team like Liverpool, every time they look at Arsenal, Among the things they admire about Arsenal, they say their defense. Just assume Liverpool had a defense slightly similar or even close to what Arsenal have. They could be thinking, we're going to dominate Premier League football or football for the next 3-4 years. We're going to be untouchable. So I do not think Arsenal fans and Manchester United are enjoying it too much anyway. Even if they are, maybe it's for the sake of banter. But personally, as looking at what lessons are we learning about Liverpool, how are they going to play, and again, this also somewhere you said you need a defensive midfielder more than you need Alexander Isak. I think you and I could agree on that in terms of priority. But also there is a video I did where I said why Liverpool should break the bank to sign Alexander Isak. Now that was before they signed Hugo Ekitike. Now that they brought Hugo Ekitike, the circumstances have sort of shifted. When you look at their setup today, Hugo Ekitike was the front man, Florian Wirtz coming in behind, Cody Gakpo and Mo Salah on the sides. So if you do sign Alexander Isak becomes the target man, Hugo Ekitike goes to the wing or perhaps becomes a bench player, and yet you could have reinforced somewhere else. And I mean, for a player who is only 24 years, why do Liverpool suddenly think McGay is too expensive for that? For £40 million? Really? Anyways, it's a difference of opinion. You say, I can't see the club bringing in any more players at this window. Huge mistake. I've been crying out for a defensive midfielder for a long time. I think that would, when you say you can't see the club bringing in any more players this window, huge mistake. I would agree with you on that, particularly because it was very unfortunate that they lost. You guys lost Diego Jota. Two, you moved on Darwin Núñez, and in this particular case, I'm going to assume that Hugo Ekitike is the replacement for Darwin Núñez. Yes, you brought in Florian Wirtz, but you lost Luis Diaz. So in terms of squad depth, Liverpool had one of the best squad depth when it came to their forward players. I think that is without a doubt. You could lose Federico Chiesa because there have been multiple reports suggesting that he will leave this transfer window. Given that it's a World Cup season, he may want more guaranteed playing time. I don't know. I did think, and I do not think still, that Liverpool have done in this transfer window. I do not want to believe so, because I believe they still need another, forward player in there, as much as they need all these to cover these gaps in defense and in the midfield. But priority should be a defender at least, even if it's not true. But they need that centre back. Maybe there's somebody they're going. Maybe Liverpool are planning to pull a rabbit out of their pocket, to pull out a kid from the academy and he mesmerizes us all defensively. So unless that's what Liverpool are looking at, that they've made the assessment within the academy and this a kid that can rise up to the equation. But maybe by now, in preseason, they would have shown us who that player is going to be, but we've not seen that player. So we'll just have to wait and see. Okay. Artesta says these days you can't rule out any squad. I was hoping Liverpool could have won, but Crystal Palace won't just back down. Most teams can have all the possession of the ball, but do not utilize it well. I think that's true. By the way, usually when a one-off game is really, really hard to judge. So I cannot sit here and judge the future of Liverpool season based off of just that one game. It would be naive of me to do so, knowing better, in my position. So it's a community shield. The motivation is not the same as if Liverpool were playing Crystal Palace and it is the game that wins them the Premier League title. So I cannot, be judging Liverpool's entirety or what their fate is going to be throughout the course of the season based on that one game. But everything that we've said about Liverpool in regards to their strengths and weaknesses, we've been saying it all summer before even this particular game. So, and in some way I agree with you on that. As an Arsenal fan, I'm also shocked, but penalties make games very tricky. Okay, even if let's okay. Today, PSG, I personally believe PSG is the best team in Europe. Now, if you took PSG to to penalties and won it, that wouldn't make PSG the worst team. So, for example, on Wednesday, by the way, PSG are going to be playing Tottenham Hotspur in the UEFA Super Cup. So, if Tottenham beat up against PSG and they win the UEFA Super Cup, I cannot stand and say suddenly Tottenham are overall better than PSG. No, it's a one-off, and you can win that. We remember Manchester United in the final of the Europa League. They both played a very horrible game. Tottenham got their one chance, they utilized it, and they won a trophy for that. So Red says if we don't get Isaac, I want Rodrigo, Gehi, and Douglas Luiz. Okay, although I've not had any rumors, in fact, linking Liverpool move for Douglas Luiz, but I think he would be a huge backup. He would be a good backup player, and in any case, if we take it one season back, was a very, very good, holding midfielder, playing in a box-to-box midfielder at Aston Villa. Douglas Luiz. Mark Gehi is the captain at Crystal Palace, and I think, and by the way, I think in some games, depending on how you assess certain opponents, Mark Gehi can start ahead of Ibrahim Konate. When it comes to Rodrigo Goes, those rumors have been there for quite some time that Liverpool would make a move for him as a replacement for Luis Diaz. Although not much headway has been made in that direction. Arsenal are also interested. In fact, as far as this last week was concerned, a majority of the reports about Rodrigo Goes was that Liverpool and Arsenal were proposing initial loan deals for Rodrigo Goes. Whether Real Madrid will be inclined to say yes to those moves remains to be seen. But also the other sticking point, apparently, Rodrigo Goes, which is not really new, when you buy a player from Real Madrid, is his wages. So they do remain an issue. So we'll just have to wait and see. But otherwise, I do understand why your wishes are such. But also, I think if Liverpool were to get those three players, it would give them good quality squad depth in that sense. It would be very, very good squad depth in that very sense, because there is a centre back, there's a midfielder, a defensive midfielder, and then there's a winger / cam striker. So when I look at Liverpool, maybe again when it comes to replacing players like Luis Diaz, they're looking at players like William Gomoho and saying maybe we have a team in here that we can give a chance, and he burst on the scene the way we had Raheem Sterling back in the days. You remember that front three of Raheem Sterling, Daniel Sturridge, and Luis Suarez, that was ripping, Premier League defenses to shreds. Remember when they scored 4 goals against Arsenal within just 19 minutes? So they could be looking at that. Anyways, Testa says I'm off now. Thank you so much for a very good stream, Tribe. It's always a blessing to hear your insights. Everyone else watching and Tribe, have a great evening. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you so much, Testers of Life, for sparing us the time to be with us every single day for our evening broadcasts / nights. Our defense is panicky when a ball goes into the box. I've been saying it for years. We need a defensive coach to join Ancelotti's backroom team. I think because Liverpool are very good going forward, or have been very good going forward, the inefficiencies in defense have not always shown that much. In any case, Liverpool had one of the best defenses, both domestically and in Europe last season, but particularly in Europe, when you look at the kinds of goals that they did concede. I think it was Inter Milan who had the best defense, especially at the league first format of the Champions League. Then you had Liverpool, you had Arsenal. I think both had conceded about 6. I do not remember the exact figure. Apologies on the internet glitch there. I think it was about 5 or 6 goals that they had conceded. So they had one of the best defenses. So, and part of that is because the best way to defend is by attacking. So Liverpool are always very good at that. Once they win the ball back, quick on the transition, and suddenly the opponent is the panicking side. But I would want to agree with you to a certain extent that usually when Liverpool find a team that matches them and is really, really able to attack them and exploit certain spaces, their defense tends to look a bit shaky. And because you need a bit of cover. And given the way that Liverpool usually plays, you always need that cover. You say personnel wise, we have one of the best defense, but as a system, we are poorly defensively. Yes, because usually you play with your fullbacks going all the way up front, which tends to leave lots of spaces behind them. And you remember every time you played, for example, against Arsenal in recent years, Gabriel Martinelli versus Alexander Trent Arnold has always been one of that key battles that Martinelli always won. Part of it was that because Trent Arnold was often going so further up front, every time Martinelli received that ball, he had a quick head start. And by the time Trent Arnold was coming back, you're always in a panicky decision if you're a defender, having to run past the opponent or the attacking opponent and need to get yourself in position to then defend against them. So that's why he predominantly relied on the support of Ibrahim Konate on that right side to defend. So every time he found himself with wingers that were as good and as fast, he sort of struggled a bit. Again, whenever Andre Robertson goes in as a fullback, to play that cross weight on the edges of the 18-yard box, that left Liverpool a bit vulnerable, because then suddenly you have these two centre backs and perhaps the holding midfielder trying to make that sort of back three kind of a shape, which Arsenal tend to use as well, although Arsenal rely on one of the wingers being one of the left backs, the fullbacks being an inverting left back to join the midfield. So when they go forward, usually it's either them or the holding midfielder that stays a bit behind a bit. So, but yeah, it's the system that contributes much to that. But individually, Liverpool defenders are good as well. So the system contributes to how they play and how they concede, and why sometimes they find themselves in a bit of a panic mode. Again, you remember that very unfortunate goal that Virgil van Dijk was party to that Martinelli scored against Alson Ramsey-Specker, that bit of miscommunication and collision in a way. So then you remember the goal of Leandro Trossard. It's because of the system, really. Then also you say it's the way we concede lazy goals. I think all big teams, I think they would acknowledge they do concede lazy goals, although when it comes to the allegiances that we pay to our respective teams, we always want everything to be perfect, and I cannot fault you for wanting that for your team. Yeah, sometimes there's so many goals you see in the Premier League against certain top sides, and you're telling yourself that at this sort of level, at top level, where the stakes are that high, you shouldn't be really conceding those kinds of goals. For example, look at Arsenal, how they concede those goals where they are looping the ball over the goalkeeper. I mean, they've conceded them like twice or more in recent years, and yet I don't know if they've not learned from that, or they feel that they feel that it's not something they need to correct. For me, I still remain baffled about that. You say, Red says, look at the 1920 season, we were good going forward, but also defensively good too. I want to see more of a defensive balance. Again, when you look at that season, when you look at the player profile in terms of your defense, not much has really changed. But again, it was a bit of a system thing. And then the kind of midfield that you had. For example, last season, you played with the number 6, Ryan Gravenberch, who predominantly is not a traditional number 6. He's a number 8. He prefers to play as an 8. But because Arne Slot asked him to play that role, he took it all. And while he executed it to great strength, there were bound to be certain inefficiencies especially in the manner in which he covered the defense overall. So while you want to make reference on the 2019 season that had Gini Wijnaldum, Jordan Henderson, and what's his name, Fabinho in that midfield, I think. Let me put it to you: if you have to choose between Dean Henderson, Fabinho, and Wijnaldum, that midfield three, and the one you have of Brian Gravenberch, McAllister, and Dominic Szoboszlai, which midfield three block would you go to? especially with the respective systems within which they played. Which one would you go for? Personally, I'll go with the one of Jurgen Klopp, and particularly because of its strength, especially when it came to that support that they gave to the front three of Firmino, Sadio Mane, and Mo Salah in the counter press. It was a very, very effective system, which made the defense look very effective as well. So, but tell me, which one would you choose in your personal opinion? I'll go with Prime Fabinho, Henderson, and Wijnaldum. Exactly, because those guys covered a lot of ground. They covered a lot of ground, and while technically, in terms of being technically gifted, then Jordan Henderson is not the best of players. He really looked good in that composition of system because it was about the energy, it was about the shift, it was about the motivation, and knowing that if Gini misses, he is going to be right there. If I do miss, Fabinho is going to be right there, and that kind of thing. The kind of cover that they gave each other was really, really very effective. You said Wijnaldum was very underrated. We miss him a lot. Indeed, he was very underrated. I remember the first time I watched him at Newcastle, and he was playing. He was at the time he was being played in a more advanced role, and I was like, "Wow, what a player! What a player!" When it came to his energy, when it came to his physical presence, when it came the way he dribbled as players sometimes, and he had that eye for goal from a bit of distance, because at Newcastle he was often played, I think, as a bit of a number 10 kind of player. And when he came to Liverpool, it was about energy. It was him knowing that he's now in a more dynamic system. But Liverpool really, Jurgen Klopp really worked those players, their cast off, and they executed their roles really, really well. And by the way, it's because of the effectiveness of the counter press that Jurgen Klopp was deploying that made you forget about the inefficiencies that Liverpool's backline had, especially when it came to the fullbacks, because oftentimes they were high up front the pitch, but because it was so hard for you to drive the ball from within your own half to reach their defense, you often lost the ball before you got to them. So at the end of the day, really looked very, very impressive. But yeah, I certainly do agree with you on what your choice has been for that midfield. So anyways, guys, it's been a fruitful conversation, but let's take a quick look at what's the latest from the world of speculation and gossip as compiled by BBC Sport. That's our source for when it comes to overall speculation and gossip on transfers as we digest them. England winger Jack Grealish has agreed to join Everton on loan from Manchester City. That's according to Team Talk. I'm yet to see any credible sources reporting that, but let's wait and see. We do know that Everton are interested in signing him, just as much as Tottenham Hotspur. Clubs like Napoli and Bayer Leverkusen were overseas clubs that were being reported to have interest in the 29-year-old English attacking midfielder. Then Chelsea are in talks with RB Leipzig over a potential swap deal for Xavi Simons, 22, that could mean French forward Christopher Nkunku are returning to the German club. Riyadh says the Premier League is going to... Oh, I need to read that correctly. The Premier League is going to night this season a lot of talent. Okay, I think it's going to be very interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of talent. Would you take a swap deal for Christopher Nkunku and Xavi Simons if you're RB Leipzig? I think I would take it if Chelsea are adding in more money, because Christopher Nkunku is 27, the other one is 22. Can play across the front three. Christopher Nkunku can play off the left wing as well as a striker. And he was very effective at RB Leipzig, so I think I'll take him back. Then Nicholas Jackson favors the move to Newcastle United should the secondary striker leave Chelsea during this transfer window. That's according to the Telegraph, while Newcastle will wait to resolve the future of Swedish striker Alexander Isak before deciding whether to move for Chelsea striker Nicholas Jackson. That's according to PA News Agency. Now, I'm of the view that Newcastle shouldn't wait to lose Isak to sign a striker, or shouldn't sign a striker with the view of losing Isak immediately. I've always been of the view that Newcastle should stick with Isak for one more season at least. That's my view, and I maintain that. Then Newcastle have made a bid for Brentford's Yohan Wissa, but Liverpool are monitoring the situation as the DRC forward, 28, is an alternative if they fail to sign Isak. That's according to Code Offside. Wow. Then French forward Rando Colomwani would prefer to join Juventus than Newcastle after spending the second half of last season on loan with the Italian club from PSG. That's according to Team Talk. While Sunderland have inquired about signing 26-year-old England defender Lloyd Kelly, who has just joined Juventus on an obligation to buy a move after an initial loan for Newcastle. That's according to Gazette dello Sport. While AC Milan are in talks over the signing of Danish striker Rasmus Højlund, 22, but they want a loan with a buy option, whereas Manchester United would prefer a permanent sale. That's according to Sky Sports News. After signing Slovenian striker Benjamin Sesko, Man United have shifted focus to offloading England winger Jadon Sancho, Argentine winger Rango Garnacho, and Brazilian forward Antony. That's according to the Standard. While Manchester United are considering signing free agent Dominic Calvert-Lewin after the former England striker left Everton at the end of last season. That's according to Code Offside. Not the first time we are hearing about this rumor. It's been around for quite some time. Then Nottingham Forest have made an offer for Monaco's 21-year-old French midfielder Magassa. That's according to the Coup. Tsimikas is edging nearer to leaving Liverpool after being left out of the Community Shield squad, with Nottingham Forest having been interested in the 29-year-old Greek left back. That's Kostas Tsimikas. Then Besiktas and Fenerbahce might make a move for Marseille's Jonathan Rowe, while Rennes and Atlanta have also been linked with the 22-year-old English winger. That's Jonathan Rowe. Then Jamaican forward Mikel Antonio, 35, says he is talking to clubs in England and abroad after leaving West Ham at the end of last season. That's according to TalkSport. While Enzo Fernandez will not leave Chelsea this summer, despite reports in Spain linking the Argentine 24-year-old with a move to Paris Saint-Germain. That's according to Fabrizio Romano. Saudi Pro League club Al Nassr have reached an agreement with French winger Kingsley Coman over a move from Bayern Munich. That's according to Blade in Germany. While Mali midfielder Abdoulaye Diakoni, 32, has joined newly promoted Saudi side Nayom as a free agent after leaving Everton. That's according to the Quick in France. And Nayom, that's where Alexander Laxate will be playing his trade next season. But thank you so much, guys, for a fruitful conversation this night. Thank you so much, Pedri. Thank you so much, Eric Gamer, Abdul Gamer, Tester of Life. Always a pleasure to see you around. Thank you so much, LFC. Thank you so much, Nova Bro. Thank you so much, Felix, for being part of us. Thank you so much, Reds, for being part of tonight's podcast. I hope all of you, the new faces, managed to subscribe. Thank you so much, Riyad, for inspiring a minute to be with us. It's been a pleasure being this with you guys. Have yourselves a blessed night. Let's meet again tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.